9 tower cranes, chosen for one reason. They can actually lift what their spec sheets promise. This lineup starts with a 6-ton crane that erects itself in an afternoon and ends with a machine strong enough to swing a nuclear reactor's steel liner into place. Every model here worked a real job site, and the numbers get harder to believe as we go. The Potain Igo T 85A opens this lineup because it barely needs a job site at all. This is a self-erecting tower crane, built to unfold itself from a folded trailer package without a second crane on hand to assemble it. French manufacturer Potain designed it for exactly the sites where space is the enemy. Narrow urban infill lots, backyard extensions, single-house builds squeezed between existing buildings. It is the smallest machine in this ranking, and the rest of the video only gets bigger from here. At full extension, the Igo T85A reaches a jib length of 45 meters, but its maximum lifting capacity tops out at 6 tons, dropping to just over 1 ton once the hook travels all the way to the tip. Hook height adjusts between roughly 31 and 42 meters, depending on how the mast is configured for the job. The whole unit folds down small enough to move on a single trailer, and a crew can have it standing and working in about an hour. No larger crane required to lift it into position. 6 tons sounds modest, but that is still heavier than a fully loaded delivery truck, swung 45 meters out on a boom thinner than a lamppost. For a crane this compact, that combination of self-assembly and real lifting capacity is the entire selling point. Stood upright, the Igo T85A's mast climbs to around 42 meters, roughly the height of a 13-story building, while its jib swings out 45 meters from the tower, nearly half the length of a football pitch. Next to a person standing at its base, the crane looks like a skyscraper on legs. It is the smallest entry in this lineup, but even the smallest tower crane here dwarfs anything you would see on a residential street. The Igo T85A's one serious flaw is reach. Self-erecting cranes cap out around 45 meters because the same folding mechanism that lets them assemble themselves also limits how far they can extend. Potain's answer is the MC85B, a compact top-slewing crane that gives up the fold-out convenience in exchange for a longer jib. It still needs a mobile crane to assemble it piece by piece, but once it is up, it covers far more of a crowded city block than its self-erecting sibling ever could. The MC85B carries a maximum load of 5 tons, slightly less than the Igo T85A, but its jib stretches to 52 meters, 7 meters farther out. That extra reach matters more than the tonnage difference on the tight, oddly shaped city lots this crane is built for, sites hemmed in by neighboring buildings where a longer boom means the crane can service the whole footprint from a single corner. Hook height is adjustable to match the surrounding structure, so contractors can tuck the counterweight and cab below rooftop lines that would otherwise force a taller, costlier machine. 5 tons is enough to place precast concrete panels or structural steel sections one at a time, which covers most of what a mid-rise city job actually needs lifted. Look at where the cab sits, right below the jib pivot at the very top of the mast. Unlike the Igo's ground-based folding arms, the MC85B's entire slewing assembly, cab, counter jib, and main jib rotates as one unit up there, which is what lets it hold a longer boom without the stability tricks a self-erecting crane relies on. That top-mounted rotation is the real difference between these first two machines, more than the tonnage numbers suggest. Standard top-slewing cranes like the MC85B still have a hidden limit, the bracing under their jib. That triangular truss support keeps the boom rigid, but it also means the crane cannot get too close to another tower crane without the two jibs colliding mid-air. Potain's MDT-219 removes that truss entirely. It is what the industry calls a topless crane, a flat jib design that lets several units work stacked at different heights on the same site without their booms ever touching. The MDT-219 lifts up to 10 tons at its base and reaches out 65 meters on the jib, nearly 40% farther than the MC85B. Because there is no bracing above the boom, contractors can run this crane's jib directly under a taller neighbor's, packing 2 or 3 cranes onto a site that would only fit one traditional model. That matters on dense downtown builds, where every meter of usable lot costs real money, and there is no room to stagger crane positions far apart. 10 tons is enough to swing a loaded concrete bucket or a full steel beam section, and this crane became one of Potain's most ordered models specifically because it solves a scheduling problem, not just a lifting one. Contractors were not just buying capacity, they were buying the ability to run multiple cranes on the same footprint. Fully assembled, the MDT 219 stands around 70 meters tall on a typical mid-rise job, with its jib running out the full 65 meters, longer than an Olympic swimming pool. Stand a person at the base, and the operator's cab is a speck against the sky. It is a mid-pack machine in this lineup by tonnage, but by reach, it already outclasses everything self-erecting. The MDT 219 solves the crowding problem, but it is still a French machine built to French Potain standards. Liebherr, the German manufacturer, builds its own answer in the Hammerhead class, the 200 ECH-10 Litronic. Hammerhead cranes keep the classic flat-topped silhouette recognizable on skylines, worldwide. Cab and jib both fixed rigidly to the tower top. No telescoping counter-jib folding required. Where Liebherr sets itself apart is the control system riding inside that cab. The 200 ECH-10 Litronic matches the MDT 219's 10-ton maximum capacity, but stretches its jib out to 60 meters, and its hook can climb to a maximum height of 68.9 meters when the tower is built out in full. What makes this machine notable is not the raw numbers, it is the Litronic control system underneath them. A load moment computer that constantly checks the combination of load weight, radius, and wind speed, and steps in before the crane ever approaches a genuine overload. That is the difference between a crane operator estimating a lift by eye and a crane that does the math itself, in real time, load after load. On a job stacking floor after floor of a mid-rise tower, that automated margin of safety is worth more to a site supervisor than an extra ton of capacity would be. Watch the cab tucked just under the jib, small compared to the machine around it, but that is where the Litronic system lives. Sensors along the jib feed load and wind data straight to a screen inside, so the operator sees the crane's real-time safety margin instead of guessing it. It is not a flashy detail, but it is the one that keeps a machine like this working through a shift when a sudden gust would stop a less instrumented crane cold. Every crane so far swings its jib in a full circle around the tower, and on an open site, that is never a problem. But push a building high enough into crowded airspace over other towers, other cranes, sometimes flight paths, and a flat jib swinging unrestricted becomes a hazard by itself. Potain's MR618 solves that with a luffing jib, a boom that pivots up and down like a fishing rod instead of staying locked horizontal, so it can lift a load and then tuck itself in close to the tower when it needs to clear a neighboring structure. The MR618 lifts up to 32 tons, more than 3 times the capacity of the MDT 219, while keeping a working footprint small enough to slot between existing towers on a dense urban site. Luffing the jib up steep and short keeps the crane's swing radius tight, which is exactly what a super-tall residential build in a packed city core requires, since regulators and neighboring property owners both limit how far a crane's boom is allowed to swing over adjoining land. 32 tons is enough to lift a fully loaded concrete truck's payload in one swing, and Potain built the MR618 specifically for the generation of super-tall towers, where floor plates are small but heights climb past 200 meters. This is the machine that lets a crane keep working directly above streets and buildings that a swinging flat jib simply could not be allowed to cross. Even luffed down tight against its own tower, the MR618's jib reaches roughly 50 meters, and the crane itself can be built out to well over 100 meters tall to keep pace with the tower rising beneath it. Seen from the street, the boom looks almost folded compared to the flat jib cranes earlier in this list, angled up rather than stretched flat, a shape built entirely around the buildings it has to avoid. If the MR618 proved the case for luffing jibs on tight sites, Wolfcran's Wolf 700B is the machine that took the idea to the tallest residential towers on Earth. This German-built Liebherr became the default choice on New York and London super-tall construction through the 2010s. The crane, visible in skyline photos of towers like 432 Park Avenue and 157, long before either building topped out. The Wolf 700B lifts up to 50 tons, nearly 60% more than the MR 618, while still luffing its jib in tight to clear the dense airspace above Manhattan or central London. 50 tons is enough to place entire precast facade panels or steel modules in single lifts, cutting the number of crane cycles needed on towers that can run past 90 stories. Fully erected on a super tall job, its tower can climb past 120 meters, climbing the building itself floor by floor through a hydraulic system built into the mast. Wolfcran built its reputation on this exact class of job: super tall residential towers on postage stamp lots, where the crane has to outclimb the building for years at a time while never swinging its boom over a neighboring property line. For a decade, if you saw a luffing jib silhouetted against a Manhattan supertall, there was a good chance it was this one. Watch the point where the jib meets the tower, near the very top of the mast. That is the pivot the whole luffing system rotates around. Hydraulic rams and pendant cables pulling the boom up steep, or letting it back down flat depending on how close the load needs to swing to the tower. On a super tall job stacked with other buildings and other cranes nearby, that pivot is doing more safety work than the hoist motor ever does. Luffing jibs solve the airspace problem, but most job sites do not have one. On open commercial and residential builds without tight neighboring airspace, the flat-top hammerhead crane remains the standard, and Liebherr's 550 ECH20 Litronic is that format scaled up hard. It carries the same Litronic load monitoring system as the smaller 200 ECH, but doubles the capacity and pushes hook height well past what a mid-rise job would ever need. The 550 ECH20 Litronic lifts up to 20 tons, double the 10-ton class from earlier in this lineup, and its hook can reach a maximum height of 86.9 meters, tall enough to service a tower nearing 30 stories without needing to climb the crane mid-build. 20 tons covers precast stair cores, full structural steel trusses, even small prefabricated room modules, lifted whole instead of assembled floor by floor on site. The Litronic system scales up with the machine, cross-checking load, radius, and wind in real time on every single lift, which matters more as the numbers involved get larger and a miscalculated swing becomes far more expensive to get wrong. This is the size class where contractors stop asking whether a crane can lift a component and start asking how many components it can lift per shift. Built out to its maximum hook height of 86.9 meters, the 550 ECH20 stands taller than a 25-story building before it ever starts lifting a single load. Its jib reaches out roughly 70 meters, enough to service almost an entire city block from one fixed tower position. By height alone, this is already taller than most of the buildings the smaller cranes in this lineup were ever hired to construct. Not every job this size of crane does is a building. Liebherr's 1000 ECB 125 Litronic is a flat-top giant built for a different industry entirely, standing beside wind farms instead of skylines, hoisting turbine components that do not fit any standard mobile crane's reach. This is the machine that lifts a wind turbine's nacelle and blades into place, 149 meters in the air, on towers where the hub itself is taller than most buildings this list has already covered. The 1000 ECB 125 Litronic lifts up to 125 tons, more than 6 times the capacity of the luffing jib cranes from earlier in this ranking, and it does it at hub heights up to 149 meters, the height modern onshore wind turbines have grown to reach stronger, steadier wind. A single wind turbine nacelle alone can weigh over 70 tons before the blades even go on, and this crane is built to place that nacelle, then the hub, then each individual blade, all without needing to reposition between lifts. That combination of massive capacity and extreme hook height exists because wind energy construction moved to turbines too tall and too heavy for the truck-mounted mobile cranes that used to handle the job. 125 tons is roughly the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 747, swung up higher than most skyscrapers ever get built. Look at the base of the tower, wider and more heavily braced than anything earlier in this lineup, because everything above it, the mast, the jib, the hoist system, has to funnel 125 tons of force down through that single footprint. Wind farm sites are often remote and unpaved, so this base also has to distribute that load onto ground far less prepared than a city construction lot. It is the least visible part of the machine and the part doing the most structural work. Every crane in this lineup so far was designed to build something taller. The Kroll K-10000 was designed to build something that could not fail. German manufacturer Kroll engineered this machine in the 1980s for one job: constructing Soviet bloc nuclear power plants, where entire reactor containment sections and pressure vessel components had to be lifted as single, enormous pieces rather than assembled in parts. It remains, by lifting capacity, the most powerful tower crane ever built. The K-10000 lifts up to 120 tons at a working radius of 82 meters, and the tower itself can be built out to 120 meters tall, dimensions that dwarf even the wind turbine crane before it on this list. 120 tons at that distance is a load class normally reserved for the largest crawler cranes on Earth, machines that need weeks to assemble, yet the K-10000 delivers it from a fixed tower position, repeating the lift day after day through years of reactor construction. Nuclear plant construction in the Eastern Bloc demanded exactly that kind of repeatable, oversized precision, since reactor pressure vessels and containment domes could not be assembled from smaller pieces without compromising the seals that keep radioactive material contained. Only a handful of these cranes were ever built, because only a handful of job sites on the planet ever needed a tower crane strong enough to move nuclear infrastructure. It is a machine built for a job that most construction sites will thankfully never have. At its full 120 meters, the K-1000's tower stands roughly level with a 40-story building, and its jib carries that 120-ton load out 82 meters from the mast, nearly the length of a soccer pitch. Next to this machine, the compact city crane that opened this list looks like a toy left on a construction table. Follow the jib out from the tower, and the steel lattice is noticeably heavier than any boom earlier in this lineup. Doubled and cross-braced to carry a 120-ton load the full 82 meters without flexing under its own working weight. That reinforced lattice is the real reason this crane could do a job no other tower crane on this list was ever asked to do. It is the last machine in this ranking because it is the only one built to lift something that genuinely could not be allowed to fall.